am Bill Hodges. This is Spotlight on Government, and I have with me today Judge Jared Smith. Jared, nice to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me, Bill.
You're United Family Court Domestic Violence Division H.
Yes, sir.
I guess there's more to that. That's the County Civil Division J.
Yes, there is.
That's quite a mouthful.
It is. I handle two different divisions. I do domestic violence primarily. That's 80% of what I do, and then also 20% of what I do is county civil, which is any disputes under $15,000.
You know, we met not too long ago at a place called Bob's Vets out in
I remember
Sun
that.
City Center, and you're a veteran.
Yes, sir.
And you were there talking with some of our people about the courts. And I found it interesting, and I'm so glad you volunteered to come in and talk to me about the courts.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. My pleasure.
Let's go back a little bit on your history. I always like to let people know who the people are that are on my program. Where is it that you come from? Almost everybody in Tampa comes from somewhere else, or at least that's my opinion of Tampa.
Yes. My wife is originally from Tampa, but I am originally from Kansas. So I was born and raised born in Garden City, Kansas, spent some time there, spent some time in Colorado, ended up coming back to Kansas, going to school.
No time at Leavenworth.
No time at Leavenworth. No. I did I did go to Fort Riley for the when I entered the military to do my military processing for the travel, but that was it. That's the only no time behind bars there.
Where did you go to law school?
I went to law school at Washburn University.
Okay.
So that is there. At the time that I was going to law school, there were two accredited law schools in Kansas. There was Kansas University and Washburn, both of which were very well respected schools. Had no intention of going anywhere other than Kansas. And approximately after I graduated from law school, I actually graduated third in my class.
Oh, wonderful.
And from that, doors opened, and there was one opportunity on the Kansas Supreme Court for me to serve as a clerk with the Justice Edward Larson. He was one of the older justices on the court, amazing judge. And I took that opportunity and worked there took that 2-year clerkship. And then from there,
I would think that's better than being an associate somewhere. It would seem to me you get a little more overall training as a clerk,
yes,
rather than being an associate there doing grunt work.
Well, I can tell you that in the Kansas Supreme Court, any state Supreme Court, all of them handle matters of first impression. So they can take up matters that are issues of law that have there's either a divide in the appellate courts, or it's a brand new issue that's never been decided. And in Kansas, a lot of the issues that came before the courts were issues that literally did not have a single ruling governing the entire state.
Oh, great! That'd be fun to research.
Well, so the pressure was tremendous for a first-year law student, and my justice made it even higher than any clerk that I'd ever heard of. He told me that I was not to give him anything about what direction I was going to go on the case. He wanted me to look at the case, make my judgment, write my 20, 30, 40, 50-page memorandum, give that to all 7 members of the Kansas Supreme Court before he laid eyes on it.
Oh, you're kidding? Before he looked at it?
Before he looked at it. His opinion was he did not want to sway my opinion. He wanted my opinion to be independent.
Wow.
Yes.
What a great opportunity.
It was great. I sometimes say
or a rock to climb over.
It was one of the most stressful jobs I ever had, because I felt the pressure of the entire state on my shoulders as I was researching those issues to make sure I got them right, because I knew they would have an impact on businesses. It could, I had one case. It was it's the felony murder rule. It's commonly known as that, and it's the case of whether or not when you have two felons committing a felony like burglary, and one person gets killed by, say, the police shooting that felon, is the other felon a first-degree murderer because his co-felon died?
Oh.
The states were split almost down the middle on that issue, and in 100 years that case had never come up in Kansas.
Really?
It came before my justice and so somebody named Simfong Sofaphone is walking around free because of the decision that we made, because we decided that based on Kansas and the way the statute was written, it should not be considered felony murder.
Now, did the other 6 judges, clerks, have to do the same thing?
They did with their own cases. So each judge would be assigned 1/7
Oh,
of the cases.
Okay.
Yes.
They didn't work it on it as a court.
No, they
I
would.
always thought they'd work on it as a court.
No, the court itself, in theory, does work together. But when the cases come in and the initial pre-hearing memorandum are written, they're assigned to judges, and those judges,
By
at
the
least
Chief Justice.
Exactly. At least that's the way it happened in Kansas Supreme Court. I think many courts are that way.
When
So,
you did your research, did you happen to use the LexisNexis system?
I am not certain which system they had. It was either Westlaw or LexisNexis. One of the two.
I was one of the first 5 salespeople out there selling what was then Ohio Bar Automated Research
Yes.
on computer, but it was the way of getting away from the old sites from various books and actually going into computer to do it.
Yes. Actually, now that you say that, I think we had both systems because there were some cases, back then, I don't think it's this way anymore, but 15, 17 years ago, some cases were on LexisNexis and some cases were on Westlaw.
Depends on whose database had been built up.
Yes.
We had one of the first big databases, and it was in the very beginning, believe it or not, we were using ASR 33 teletypes to go back and forth to the computer on.
Wow.
Can you imagine? Clack, clack, clack.
No.
But it was a fun time, and it was interesting because I got to teach how to do computerized legal research to the Supreme Courts of Ohio, Michigan, and Illinois.
Wow.
And by the way, that's where I learned to say the word Illinois. I stood up to make a presentation to the Supreme Court there, and I said, I'm so happy to be here in Illinois. Chief Justice looked at me and said, Bill, if you can do business with us, learn how to say the state's name. So I've always dropped the S. Now it's just straight Illinois.
That's good.
All right, now what happened with your judgeship? You went in there and you became the clerk,
Yes.
but there was a twist here. 9/11 came along. What happened then?
It did. So I graduated law school in 2000. I was a 2000 graduate. Studied for the bar exam that summer. Started in August in my clerkship. Thankfully passed the bar exam, so I retained my clerkship and worked for. It was a 2-year clerkship. My justice's attitude was, you stay for 2 years, and then I'm going to push you out of the nest because I want attorneys to develop into something more than just research attorneys. Not that that's not a great thing to
No,
do,
sure.
but that was his attitude. He was only going to let people
Smart
stay there.
man.
Yeah, he was good. He was former military
Had
as
to
well.
be diversified.
He was a Korean War veteran, so
All right.
great man, and still living in his 80s. And so he told me
You
that
have to
right up
send him
front.
a videotape of this.
I will. Yeah. So he told me that up front. So I knew about 1 year into it, I started looking and thinking about what the next
Where you
step
wanted
was
to
going to
go,
be.
yeah.
And in August 2001, I received a letter unsolicited from the Air Force, and the letter was addressed, "Dear colleague." It wasn't even addressed to me. I don't know exactly how they got my address, but somehow they did. And I looked at that letter, and it was the Air Force JAG, and I thought, well, that looks really interesting, serving in the military. I
Sure.
took that letter, put it on the shelf, and thought, well, I'll think about that. A month later, 9/11 happened. And I took that letter off the shelf, and I really seriously thought about it. My wife and I both prayed about it, and the nagging thought was, if good people don't serve, where's this country going to be? I knew that.
And the JAG is so important.
It really is. It really is. I mean, depending on where you're assigned, you can be right along the side of a commander, making decisions as to what targets should be targeted, whether it's legal or not. And
I've
then,
had our mutual friend, Judge Shante,
yes,
on the air with me, and his career with the military is just absolutely phenomenal.
absolutely.
He's done a lot of good.
He has, and he has an amazing career. I served 4 years, so not nearly as many as Judge Shanti did,
And still does.
Yeah, and he does,
Yeah.
exactly. Yes. So
Reserved.
In going in, I knew that it was something that'd be an important place to be, and of course, did the application process. It's very lengthy to do a direct commission. It wasn't that they offered to pay for my law school. They didn't offer to satisfy any student loan dets, anything
Just
like
give you
that.
a job,
Yeah,
right?
they offered the GI Bill, and I turned it down because I thought the last thing I want is more school. It was just to serve. I just went in to serve, and we started within months of 9/11. I was raising my hand to swear to support and defend the Constitution. In June 2000, in June 2002, and then in August 2002, I was being shipped off to basic training, which was in Montgomery, Alabama for the officers, and Montgomery was where my JAG training was, and then my first base assignment was MacDill Air Force Base, and that's what brought me to Tampa.
And now you're here. You spent your travel pay and couldn't leave?
That's right. That's right. That goes quick. So in any case, that's how I got down here, and it was obviously a wonderful experience being in the military. Had a blessing being able to serve a lot of. I mean, this was the peak of the Iraq War,
Right.
Afghanistan,
Yeah.
and there we were at Central Command servicing hundreds, thousands of active duty military. I remember going to Marine Reserve Unit on Gandy Boulevard, and I helped orchestrate preparing wills for about 200 deploying.
Oh my goodness! I never even thought about that.
Yeah.
Actually, when I was in the military, I didn't have anything to leave to anybody. so I guess I never thought of going over the JAG and getting a will made. But
Well,
now it's more important.
yes, well, especially in the reserves. You know, in the reserves, you're dealing with a lot of families,
That's true. Yeah.
businesses, people with spouses and children. So
Complicated relationships.
Exactly.
Yes.
So we prepared wills, and I'm sad to say, but it highlights the importance of it, that 2 of those did not return, of those people that went out in that particular Marine Reserve Unit.
But at least they were protected to a point.
That's what
That
we got
has to
to
make
do.
you feel good that something was done for
It
them.
did. So.
All right, you were in the military, and after 4 years, like I did, you decided to go on with your civilian career.
Yes.
Did you go into law practice or corporate law?
I did. So I knew that in the JAG Corps I had practiced and done litigation, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being in trial. I enjoyed the experience of representing the Air Force. I was always on the prosecution side, so we were always representing the Air Force. Or if it was, I did claims work. Believe it or not, the Air Force also had claims filed against them. So
I bet.
our base office handled the claims about halfway to Patrick Air Force Base. We kind of split the state right down the middle, went up, let's say, roughly about 50 to 100 miles and down 50 to 100 miles, and that was our area. If an Air Force truck got in an accident, anything like that, we would handle those claims.
So it gave you a pretty wide experience besides
did.
just dealing with GIs.
It did. And so I sensed that I wanted to do civil litigation, and I applied to a few firms in Tampa. And one of them I felt was very receptive, especially to the military side. There was one in particular that there was a former JAG officer, Army JAG, who did part of my interview. And he actually, it was very nice of him. He didn't have to do this. One of my first interviews, and he said, "Let me explain to you how your military service translates into a civilian career." He actually was preparing me for other interviews.
Oh.
And then ultimately that was the job that I accepted. So I did civil litigation for over 10 years at that firm and stayed there. It was a wonderful firm, Rumberger, Kirk and Caldwell. Did a lot of what they would call insurance defense work, but ultimately developed a construction practice, became board certified in construction law, represented homeowners and general contractors and subcontractors on various construction disputes and lien issues. And I'll just say, with the board certification, less than 1% of Florida attorneys are board certified in construction. Less than 6% are just board certified in anything.
Well, very few of them are litigators, too.
That's true.
I mean, people think Perry Mason, everybody goes to court, but that's not true.
That's true as well. That's true as well.
It takes a different breed of person to be a litigator.
You have to do a couple things. You got to be able to handle the pressure of litigation, but you also have to, in my opinion, you've got to be able to handle it in a way that it doesn't turn you into a bitter, sour, disrespectful opposing counsel to the people
I
you're
saw
up against.
where in the paper there was one of those recently that was in bad shape, and people were wanting to get him disbarred and so forth.
Yes.
He just got more angry and more angry, it appears.
Yes.
Won't mention him, but if you read the paper, you saw that.
Yes.
So why would you leave something as lucrative as your position with the law firm? By the way, not all lawyers make a lot of money. It's a farce. A lot of them are hungry. But when you're in a firm like yours doing what you did, you had to be pulling down a pretty good check every year. Why would you leave that to go into a courts, which the check isn't that good, plus you have to run all the time to keep your job, not just be good at it?
Well, I could say it was similar to the calling that I had to go into the military. When I felt the call to join the Air Force, it was impressed on my heart that if good people didn't step up and were willing to serve, where would the country be? I think the same thing is true with the judiciary. If good people weren't willing to put their names in the hat, there's appointment process where people don't even realize this, but when judges retire, when judges go up to an appellate court, or maybe they pass away, they get sick, they're unable to handle their office, there's a constant flow of appointments that are opening up. And those appointments often end up being judges that stay there for 20 or 30 years,
Right.
like our current chief
Right.
judge was appointed. Judge Manning was appointed. So
Shows they did a good job in appointing him.
they did, and so they go, and the appointment process, I don't think people realize just how detailed it is. I filled out an application. I think my application was over 30 pages long.
Wow.
By the time it was all said and done, I had to disclose everything on that application process. And I think the biggest one they looked at was when they said, who are the last 6 people you were against in trial? Who are the last 6 people you were against in mediation? And they called those attorneys,
Oh, wonderful.
yes, to see
what they thought.
whether, I call it the jerk factor, whether you were the type of attorney that pulled fast ones, promised one thing and did something else, forced them to litigate frivolously a lot of motions. Those are the questions that they ask the people that are
Oh.
against you, and they can do that, and they very carefully vet those that they put on a list to the governor for ultimate appointment. And when I saw those appointments coming open, I thought, well, at the very least, I need to be
You're going to
willing.
be nice to these last 6 guys, right?
No, I could tell you, I had no thoughts of it before. It was pretty rather sudden. I didn't build up my career to someday become a judge. It was a pay cut, a significant pay cut for me to do it. But I felt like if good people didn't at least put their names in the hat for these appointments, then what would our judiciary look like, and how could we complain if we were to say, wow, our judiciary is not a good quality judiciary, and yet people that were good quality attorneys weren't willing to at least put their names in the hat.
Let's talk about the court itself.
Okay.
I know you can't talk about individual cases because they're a matter of record, and people could go and say, well, here's the facts, and he was talking about that, so it's so-and-so. But talk to me about your court. What kind of things do you see? It would appear to me that there's got to be a lot of downsides to that court. You've got to see a lot of really bad things.
Well, I went, obviously I had a construction practice where I used to have the fun job of going out on work sites and looking at sometimes $1 million homes or apartment buildings or high-rises to handling a full domestic violence court. And I'll focus on domestic violence. We can talk about county civil, but I think domestic violence is probably the one that may touch more people's lives, frankly, that might be watching this. The first day of hearings that I had was a full day. They didn't wade you into the pool. They pushed you out in the deep end, and my training essentially consisted of a phone call saying, hey, it was emails saying, hey, come down to the courthouse on your own time and watch some other judges do it. That was my training. I didn't actually get to go to New Judges College until I'd been on the bench for almost a year.
Really?
Yes. So at least over 6 months. So I started in June, and I didn't go to New Judges College until January. So there were 7 months there, 6 or 7 months where I was
Just wading in and doing your best.
doing my best and working off of reading the statutes, and the learning curve was about vertical for those first few weeks. But when I got off the bench after a full day, my very first full day of hearings, which was started on a Monday, and they said they cleared my docket on Monday, but Tuesday I'm in it. I got off after about 8 hours of domestic violence hearings. Sweat, I think, was beating down my brow, but I knew I was exactly where I needed to be.
Wow.
I went from handling construction cases where I would work through a construction case and it would last for a year and a half to 2 years to make a difference for a client, to making differences every 15 to 20 minutes. significant differences in people's
yeah.
lives.
People going to jail.
Well,
people getting help.
yeah, people getting help, people getting injunctions. In my court, it's a family law court, so we don't send people to jail.
Oh, really?
We can if they hold them in contempt, but as a general course, and what I hear, it's whether an injunction should be issued, who gets the children, who gets the house. It creates about 500-foot radius between the person who's asked for the injunction and the person who receives the injunction against them. They're the petitioner and the respondent. I want to be careful to not use terms that kind of throw people off. But
no, but that's,
yeah.
I would have thought, for instance, if somebody didn't pay child support, does that come through your court?
That does not come through my court. That will go through a family law court, but it will not happen in my court.
So yours are primarily disputes?
They are, there's about 5 different areas that we handle. So domestic violence is obviously the name of the court, but it's not just domestic violence that we handle. Domestic violence is anytime you have a family type relationship. It doesn't even have to be marriage. It could be a boyfriend, girlfriend. It could be a mother and a son. It could be a brother and a sister. They have to have lived together at some point.
Okay.
If there's a blood relation and they've lived together, that's
How would they end up in court?
Well, they come to our courthouse and they actually file a petition at the courthouse. There's a floor.
One of the parties.
Yeah, one of the parties, the party that's actually seeking the injunction will come and they
When
will.
you say injunction, are you talking restraining order?
Yes, you can use those interchangeably.
Okay, that's what.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of people
I watch TV. I'm aware of restraining orders.
Yes, yes, it's the same concept. We call them injunctions, and the title of the document is injunctions, but it's a restraining order.
So many of the cases you hear are people wanting to get a restraining order?
That's in my domestic violence court. That's all the cases that I hear.
Oh.
Every one of them. Every one of them. And then the inner workings.
So the
of
results
enforcement.
will always be either you issue or do not issue the restraining order, but nobody goes to jail.
Unless they violate it.
Unless they violate the restraining order.
Right. If they violate it, the step one is it goes to the state attorney's office to look it over for prosecution.
Okay.
And if they look it over and they don't prosecute it, then it comes to my court and we decide what to do. Thankfully, most people respect restraining orders, but there are situations where they don't, and then the court has to deal with that through the contempt power. But that's definitely not the largest. I mean, the 97% of what I do are the hearings that we hear, and the what we call ex parte petitions. So someone comes in to file one of those, and until we rule on it, it's a private.
That's a Latin term, ex parte.
Yes.
So let's translate it to English.
Thank you. So ex parte is outside the presence of the other party.
Okay.
Ex being outside, parte being the party. It's in the presence of the court. It's when one side gets to do something with a judge that the other side doesn't know about. And in domestic violence, it's very important that you have the ex parte system in order to protect the person filing it. Otherwise, if the other side knew about it, that could be an incident where there is a violent outbreak because the person has to say, oh, by the way, I'm filing an injunction against you. Oh, why are you doing that? And then explosion.
But if somebody comes into you and they say, I can't get along with my wife, I'm afraid to close my eyes at night because she stands over me with a club.
Right.
How can you issue the injunction or the restraining order or whatever if you don't talk to the other party?
They have to lay out all the facts in their petition. So what their petition says is what we base our ruling on. And many times people don't put enough facts to let us know whether there was really an act of domestic violence. We don't get to judge credibility. We don't get to size them up. We don't do a criminal background check and see how many felonies they've had. We look at what they've alleged, we look at the statute, and if they've met the elements of the statute, the injunction is granted. If they have, unless there's extenuating circumstances, maybe somebody that has fraudulently filed or filed multiple times and they've been denied, we can look at that. We'll look at that history, but generally speaking, it's based on the facts of the complaint or with the petition and the statute, and if they've met those elements, then they get it.
I guess I'm not clear, and maybe my audience is better than I am on it, and you went to law school to learn it. But it would seem to me that if somebody came in and alleged something, filled out a document, said all these things happened, and you looked at that and you only used that to make the determination of whether the injunction would be issued or not, if an injunction is issued against me, that becomes a matter of record. And now I've got to say, wait, none of this happened,
Right.
but I never had a chance to say anything about it. Is that a part of the law that I don't get a chance to, or can I come back and say, listen, none of these things, but still the injunction's been filed against me?
So here's how it works, and this is definitely probably hopefully the greatest benefit to your listeners, so they can understand the process.
I think it's important.
I do too, and
Right now it doesn't seem fair, although fair only applies to skin complexion, skies, and a place to take your hogs twice a year to be judged. So maybe fair isn't a matter of it.
The system starts out with a person that comes into the courthouse, and they're directed. They're told right where to go. You don't have to look it up online. If you go into the information desk and you tell them, I'm trying to file a domestic violence petition, they will guide you on which room to go to. You go to that room, you fill out your petition, you allege your facts, and in those facts, the judge will receive it the same day, will rule on it the same day within 24 hours.
And it's important with domestic violence that
Very
something
important.
be handled right now, not 3 weeks from now.
Very important. And so that, and all of that is confidential. That whole process, none of that is disclosed publicly. The judge will review it. The judge will either grant or deny it. And if it's granted in a temporary state so that it's only effective for 15 days. Now it will be set for hearing very quickly. So the important thing to remember is if you file one, you have the responsibility to call the courthouse and constantly check up and say, was it granted and what time is my hearing? Because if you miss your hearing, it gets denied because you didn't show up for your hearing. So the stage 2 is they file it, we set it for hearing within 15 days by statute because your rights are being affected. The other person's rights are being affected. Maybe they had to lose their home. Maybe they lost their firearms. Maybe they even lost their children. But the law says that's okay because we need safety for those 15 days. And within 15 days, we hear it, we make a decision. That decision is based on the hearings that we have in court. That's what I was doing this morning before I came here. I had those hearings, and I had 30 scheduled this morning.
Judge Smith, we're running out of time.
Okay.
And I would love to have had more time to talk to you about the law because the law is fascinating. It's what we live under. That's the important thing. And not to understand the law, not maybe to the extent that you do, and not to have good counsel puts you at a severe disadvantage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Bill, thank you so much for letting me come here, and I'd be glad to be a guest any other time. You just let me know.
Well, we always like to have veterans on the show.
Well, thank you.
Everybody knows I'm very deeply involved in Veterans Affairs.
Absolutely.
You're unique, you're special, and you're great. Tell yourself so often because you are, you know, and we'll see you on the next Spotlight on Government. And again, Judge Smith, thanks for sharing your ideas.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.